Welcome to Unlocking the Parenting Code. I'm Kathy, and this is the space where we dive into real-life parenting stories. Because let's face it, raising kids today can feel like trying to crack a complicated code. Together we'll explore the ups and downs, share insights, and swap tips that make this journey a little smoother. So grab a cup of coffee, relax, and let's unlock the parenting code together. Today, I'm excited to introduce Aga Akrout. Aga is a transformational and embodiment coach, yoga teacher, and author. She's also the mother of 3 children, twin boys, 11, and a daughter, 2.5. Her approach to parenting centers on fostering self-trust, emotional intelligence, self-love, and acceptance. Through her unique journey, Aga has embraced the challenges of parenthood as a catalyst for personal growth and evolution. Aga joins us today from France. Welcome to the show.
Hello, I'm so excited to be here.
I'm excited to have you. Aga, let's start with your personal parenting story and what challenges you faced, how you navigated the situation, and what you learned. It's likely that someone listening to this episode will hear something in your parenting story that helps them along their road.
Oh my goodness, that's a big story. That's a big story to tell. So I'm a mama for 11 years now. My boys just turned 11, not even 2 weeks ago, and I have twins. So that was the whole thing altogether a bit different. I've been working with kids throughout my life. I always loved kids, so I felt like I was very prepared for that. In high school, we could kind of choose the majoring, and I choose early childhood education, and I was already kind of dipping my toes into that. Then I shifted away from it, and then I was coming back to work with children here and there. And then eventually I was working in a creche, and I was managing a creche, which is like a kindergarten. While I was doing that, I became a mama to my twin boys. And it was, I felt so ready. I thought everything is gonna be like so easy because I know my stuff. But but the funny thing is with kids that, no matter what you think, you know nothing. When they come, everything completely changes and shifts. And there's a lot of part of you, loads of parts that you didn't know that existed within you. They start coming out, which might be very surprising, from our own upbringing, our own conditioning. So this is another way to look at that, because then you're thinking, for example, that you never do certain things and they would come out here and there. So yeah, so that was a whole big journey. The first years were a bit crazy. First year, my husband said that he doesn't remember much from the first year.
Yeah.
Because yeah, it was crazy, but at the same time, it was absolutely wonderful. We are living at the moment in France. When they were born, we're living in Ireland, which is also not a country that none of us is from. I'm originally from Poland, and my husband is originally from Tunisia. We met in Dublin, and we stayed there until boys were 5. And so, we were with our children by ourselves. We didn't have family support. We had amazing friends, but we couldn't take a break, for example. We couldn't just go for a dinner or, I don't know, go for a weekend together. That wasn't an option. Plus, we were always very attached. It was very hard for us to leave them. There were like little instances that we would leave them here and there. And in general, we were very much combined into each other. And what we discover in the first years of parenting, that this is actually a blessing. Because yes, it takes a village to raise a child, right? Yet two at the same time. But the thing is that everything has its own good and bad sides. And in this particular situation, we realized it's really a blessing, because we could take a step back from what we've been taught and make our own choices more independently. Because when you have all family around you, very often, everybody wants to help. But in all those tips and advices, and you might get lost as a new parent completely. You might not be able to find your own voice and what you really want to do as a parent, how you really want to raise them, which way, what language you want to use, So I think that was the first kind of big discovery for us, that yes, maybe we didn't have as much help and time for ourselves, but we could develop this completely our and unique approach to the way we want to raise kids.
So physically being out of the area of family and relatives was an opportunity for you rather than a handicap. And does that tie in at all? Like you also had said something about breaking generational patterns. Is that something that was easier to do because you were in different areas, or is that a different kind of personal development work? And if it is, what did that look like in your parenting world?
Well, so in a way, it might be easier because you are kind of out of where you're from. But as well, because we are from two different cultures, there was a lot of adjusting in that. We've been raised in different ways. And we were growing as a parents and as a couple throughout that as well. Because we had to find the ways to create our own values instead of like kind of looking at the values that we've been brought up with, something that is good for all of us. And this is not something that is just kind of a voice from the past, but breaking certain patterns. It's never easy because, as I said at the beginning, like you don't really and completely know what's coming. That can hit you sometimes, from
Mhm. One of the
sorry.
things that I found being an expat, being part of two different cultures, very different cultures as far as partnership goes, and then raising a child, I found it that I almost was more cautious about making any assumptions really about anything. So I might think a certain way about, taking care of emotional intelligence or about discipline or about education. But I couldn't make the assumption that my partner had the same understanding and wanted to do the same, to do it the same way. So in your situation, you had two cultures. You had Tunisia and Poland for two different cultures. And then you also had the culture of where you were living, which might have
Yes.
been different. So how did like those are challenges. Like even though just the differences and having different backgrounds. Like, how did you and your husband tackle that? Like, did you talk about it before the boys were born? Did you talk about it when things came up? Did you, talk about the way it was for you, the way it was for him, and then the way that you want it to be for your family, whether it be the same or different? Like, what did it look like?
So yes, we did talk a lot. We talk a lot beforehand. We talk about what we would like for our kids before we even got married. And we agreed on certain rules based on what was important for us. But throughout the years, all of it shifted because we were growing together. Like we did so much work together as a couple to break to break this conditioning that we're carrying, and I wouldn't be able to do it without him. It was just such a beautiful combination of like we were challenging each other, beliefs, and and that was very good because, it is, but you have to be open when you do that because it can be extremely triggering. Those
Mhm.
things are go really, really deeply. And very often we're carrying things that we never question. So when there's opportunity to question certain belief in you, you're starting to get really sometimes offended. But we were doing that a little bit by joking as well. We were just, we knew we don't want to hurt each other, but we were talking a lot about things and how we want things to look like. We were always having those conversations about like, okay, so I think this is important because of this, and that, and this is how I see things. And then the other part would, okay, say, okay, for example, yeah, I agree with this part, but maybe not necessarily here. So we had a lot of conversations along the way. And what was the most challenging part, I think, it was managing the grandparents on both sides, because, we had to figure out our own way to do things that not necessarily maybe align with the traditional upbringing that we were brought
So
up
what
in.
were some of the differences? Like, what were some of the difference, for example, that your grandparents had expectations for how you would parent your children, and your husband's grandparents had different expectations? What were those differences? Like, where were the biggest clashes as far as not being on the same page?
So the biggest clashes were in probably the discipline, I would
Mhm.
say.
Yeah.
That probably is the for most of the people probably is the
Hmm.
biggest thing, because when it comes to the cultural and religion thing, there's another way to approach that. But I think the discipline was something that was kind of coming up um, the
What was that
most.
like like how were you disciplined as a child?
Oh, that was like very authoritative discipline. It was like I had to do what I was told, and I would be punished, and you know,
Okay.
and that was the thing is that I don't want to, because loads of people, when we talk about the way we were brought up, sometimes blaming parents for stuff, and sometimes it might kind of come up in a bad light. But what I think now, through what I learn as well through the parenthood, that we all do the best we can to our best abilities and what we know. And my parents love me very much, and they've done the best they could and the best they know back then. And this type of discipline was just everywhere. So I was sometimes spanked. I was shouted at. I was there was a lot of things like that. Um,
It's kind of like what's on whatever is culturally on the table at that time. And I think we can miss that when we're thinking about things from our current perspective. Like it's something I rarely have told anybody actually, but when my first teaching job, um, I taught grade one in a public school. And I mean, that's a lot, it's a lot of years ago. But at that time, there was still corporal punishment. So I was given a little a stick, like a yardstick, and with kind of the understanding, if I really needed to use it, that was one option. And it was like today that would just like even I can't believe that, even in that one generation back, that was the norm. So I don't like, I'm very careful to not judge things that happened in the past based on the rules and the culture that we have now. Like you said, parents are always, in my opinion, doing what they think is the best for their children. And if they think that the best thing is that kind of discipline, even if it hurts them to do it, they will do it because they love their children so much. So,
it's just this
I
belief that you're
yes.
carrying, that this is the best way, that if you don't do it because it's something you heard over and over again, that and there was something like when I was growing up, that you have to respect your old elders, right?
Mhm.
Um, But what, for example, and that came up a few times with my boys and for example, with my parents, right? And my answer to that is like, well, respect goes both ways.
Mhm.
Okay. You cannot expect that the child will respect you if you don't respect the child, if you don't show them how this is done, and you just require them to blindly do what you want and like be super obedient. This is not something that that is working. So I had a lot of conversations with my parents as well, and they are incredible grandparents. Like my kids are so close to them, even though like we are all the time in the different countries. We're utilizing Skype a lot
Mhm.
from early years. They were reading books to them through Skype. They were always talking to them. So they developed this really, really close relationship. And, but yeah, we had a lot of conversations like that about, raising your voice. And I'm not perfect in that because a lot of things came up. I was shouting
Sure.
too.
Yeah.
And uh, but what is really cool, I think, is that because my boys are bigger now, they are 11. And we're always very honest with them, and we always had a very deep and honest conversations with them. And if I made a mistake and if I made something that it didn't make me proud, and was a lot of it throughout my journey, I was even talking about it with my husband yesterday. It's like, oh my goodness, I wish I knew what I know now when they were little,
Yeah.
and I would do things completely differently, right? But we cannot live in that because this is really guilt creating
Mhm.
machine, and it's awful. And I was living in a guilt for many years until I realized that that's the point. We doing the best we can with what we have. And and with those conversations with my boys that I mentioned, like if I made a mistake, I would tell them. It's like,
Mhm.
listen, that wasn't great. You do not deserve that. And not the apologizing from the things like, I'm sorry, but you made me, for example, or
Yeah.
this is not apologizing, right?
Yeah.
It's been like, I'm really sorry. I
Mhm.
shouldn't have behaved this way. But you
So
know what?
having twins, I would think that life would be a little bit chaotic, especially at certain times, like in the terrible twos, the trying threes, the frustrating fours, like especially in the younger years where they're still learning to self-regulate their own emotions. So what kind of like what was your rule of thumb? Like how did you address discipline or misbehavior? What did you and your husband use as your own family, guidelines for discipline and misbehavior, especially
It
when you
depends
had
on the
twin
situation.
boys?
It depends on the situation. The boys, yeah, the boys, two boys together, this is a force of nature, definitely. But it was really depending on the situation because I really don't like, yeah, I don't like when people saying those horrible twos and all this. This is kids that just learning, and it's nothing horrible about them.
Yeah,
And
I
very often
agree.
by the language that we use, we view kids in a certain way. The language that we use, it's so incredibly important because it shapes the way we behave actually, and the way we
Yeah.
approach children and their behaviors. So we always talk to them a lot. That was always what we did. We always talked to them a lot. Um, and in early years, yes, we were still learning a lot. And there were a lot of like, oh, because you won't be able to do this, for example, like, please, like, stop. It was like we done a lot of this as well. But like I said, throughout the years, we were refining what we're saying, how we're saying, what we're doing. And through those conversations with them, we were always saying, listen, I'm really trying my best here. And I'm really sorry that it's not always coming out this way. You have to understand that, the way we were brought up as well, there's certain, so we always talk to them about that. It's like, we all learning from what we had and we're trying to better that. Each generation of parents always kind of bettered
Mhm.
the way they parent. Um, and I'm probably still far from perfect, but it's a process and we all trying to do our best. So we were always telling that to them as well. It's like, I don't want, it's not about just justification, but if you make a mistake, like you made a mistake, it doesn't mean that I don't love you.
But
So
then
if I
how do
make
you
a
how do you
mistake,
handle it? Like what do you do? Like if say say they were playing at a friend's place and some some trouble happened or whatever, and they came home and you told them that, they got in trouble at their friend's place and the mom said this, the dad said this. So I understand you would have the conversation with them. But say it was something, I don't know, say they broke something that was really valuable, really important when they knew they shouldn't have been doing whatever they were doing that caused the breaking. When they come home and you're talking to them, then how do you handle that?
This situation never happened. By the way, they never broke anything like that, which is kind of funny for kids. But we always, so if, for example, we're in public and something happens or we are with other people, I would never make them kind of on the spot and guilty in front of other people, because I don't think this is
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
And we never done that. Um, Sometimes when we were like, sometimes when the behavior was going, because with the two boys, it's like they will push each other and it grows.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
I know as a mom that that's going wrong way and it's gonna escalate into a drama in a minute. They don't see that. I
Mhm.
do. And it's still like that. It was like, okay, now we have to separate now, we have to do something else. So I'm trying to prevent those situations, which not always helps. And as well, and this is an advantage of having three languages. So there's always a language that we're in a certain situation, and there's a language that only we understand.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
to make sure that no one hears what I say or understand what I say to them, I can say, for example, okay, guys, that is going out of control now, and we have to stop because I don't want to have a drama. This is not good for you, not good for anybody. And if there was like any kind of crazy situation when we went to friends, also whatever, we were talking to them as well. It's like, if you want to go, for example, they had always very hard time leaving.
Hmm.
When we went to friends, and oh my goodness, there was like there could be a dramas and crying and shouting, and like it sometimes was taking ages. And poor people, they wanted to get on with their life, and we couldn't get our kids out of out of their house. So we would have conversations after as well. It's like, if you want to see your friends, if you wanted to be invited to your friends as well, you have to learn to respect their time and their space as well. And if I see that you cannot handle that, then maybe you wouldn't be going much to other people until you learn how. So it was this type of conversations, that we had with them. But yeah, it's always just reminding of like, guys, this is, let's try
Yeah.
to do something. Yeah.
I know, I know from working in education and being the person that children who got in trouble, they were sent to my office to be disciplined. And I'm not very big on discipline. I think discipline is really all about guiding and mentoring and supporting. And I remember the several times, like I have a way that as a strategy I use that's been very successful, but for to help make sure that those little boys, when they're coming in, that they keep their sense of, self-worth, and they're not embarrassed and they're not ostracized, and, they made a mistake. That's it. But it was also very important that I think, for accountability. So if something had happened and they made a mistake and their behavior caused harm to someone else or something else, then I always expected them and worked with them, like to brainstorm possible solutions. But there had to be some way that they could take responsibility, that they could
Oh yes,
hold
totally.
themselves accountable for it.
Yes. So yeah, we were doing that as well. So no, if they do something that they shouldn't have done, and like actually I just remember about one instance, the thing was broken. I just remember that. Um, so what we're doing is, because kids very often, like when you address, at least my kids do that. When you address something they've done and they know they've done
Yeah.
something they shouldn't have, they already feel guilty. And I
Yes.
have it's hard for them to talk about it. They want to shut down, they want to forget about it because it makes them very uncomfortable. And one of the things that that I want to teach them is to feel comfortable in the uncomfortable with the uncomfortable emotions. That we really all as a society have to learn that it's okay to feel uncomfortable, to kind of expand that threshold of so-called pain and of being uncomfortable, because that will pass. This is not something that will crush us. It's not something that will eat us. That's gonna pass like a wave. So staying with that is very good, because then we don't look for numbing or distracting ourselves and kind of we're not packing those emotions within our body. This is something I talk to them a lot about. So I will always start with like, listen, yes, you made a mistake. I can see you feel bad about it. And I see that you don't want to talk about it, but we're going to have to talk about it. If you're not ready now, we can talk a little bit later. But that talk is coming and you cannot avoid it. This is something we have to talk about. And, they could be like, oh, like angry about stuff and all this, but it's like, it's still coming. So it's up to you if it's coming now or it's coming later, but we still have to talk about it. And if you did something with your own, like you made a decision to make something or break something or do something that you shouldn't have done, you've made that decision, you've made that choice. Okay. So, and obviously you don't feel good with that choice anymore. So the thing is that you already learn a lesson here that, if you go in against yourself, you're not going to feel good with it. That's the first thing. But then if something was broken, you're going to have to fix it, or you're going to have to cover it from your own money.
Yeah.
If it wasn't like an accident is one thing, but if you do something deliberately, did I say that right?
Yeah, deliberately.
Yeah. Some words sometimes are tricky.
Yeah.
Then of course the natural consequences of it, that you will cover that, you will fix that, you will do something with it because you made that choice, and that choice had a consequence. So we're trying to as well show them the consequences of their behavior, because everything is, there's action and reaction. So you cannot expect that you're gonna do things and, for example, mommy will fix everything for you. Mommy is here for you. Mommy loves you. Mommy supports you. Mommy accepts you. But you have to learn that your decisions are your decisions and you are a maker of your life.
Well,
So you need to
especially as they're
know.
getting older, like they're
Exactly.
they're very close to moving into adolescence. So
Don't
life
even
is going,
mention that yet. I'm not ready.
well, it's not well, I don't think there's any stage of development that doesn't have its own gifts. It also has its own challenges, but I quite loved that period, and especially the when they were just moving into adolescence, because they would want to put on like they were these older, cool young boys, and then they would do something that was so goofy, and it was so, it's kind of like you knew that's the real one. That's the real little boy. I remember the first middle school dance that I chaperoned when we just moved to Beirut, and so grades 6, 7, and 8 were for this, like from 6 o'clock to 7:30. There was a dance, and it was my son was in the grade 6 at the time, and oh, it was the funniest thing to watch the grade 6 boys. So, they're about the same age, 11, 12.
Exactly. My boys are in the sixth grade. Yeah.
Yes. So they go in and there's, all these other kids in grade 7 and 8 there as well. And they're cool, especially the grade 8 ones. Like they're really cool. And they've already, they've been going to dances for at least a year, some of them 2 years. And they would be like dancing like normal. And you would have all these grade 6 kids, mostly the boys, like not so much the girls. They seem to have it a little bit more socially aware of things, but the little boys would, at that time, it was really popular I don't know if it's called the snake or the worm or whatever it is, but when you dive on the ground and so there's all these little, grade 6 boys thinking that they are being so cool and they're having the time of their life because they're so excited about moving into this new middle school world. um, it's a beautiful time. It can be really confusing, but it's a lovely time. I think because you have twins, like there's a lot of things there that I know.
Something it just came to my mind about this consequences, because
Oh,
You know, when you're telling them those consequences, they're not happy. Okay, they're not happy, obviously. But what happened to us many times, and it was actually really cool, when they were observing their friends sometimes and the way they behave towards them, and they would come home and say, for example, and that was really cool. I said it many times, you know what? I'm so happy I have a parents that give me consequences
mm,
because I learn and I know what to do. And I look like at my friend, wherever, and he doesn't, you know, his parents should give him consequences. And
yeah.
it's actually such a cool thing that they will recognize the value of learning and owning their mistakes. I don't like to say mistakes as well, because what I tell them, it's
Or
like it's a great
choices.
lesson.
Mm,
Exactly. You can choose what to do. You can wallow in a guilt and in anger because you've done something wrong, and you can blame everybody else and go into victimhood. Like we talk about all those things all the time. Or you can own that and you can learn something from it. It's always the greatest lessons if you choose to see that this way, you know. And then sometimes when, you know, when situation comes down a little and we go back to that talk, and then we'll be like, okay, so what did you learn? What is the lessons for you here? And yeah, so that's how we kind of
Are
going
you
around.
are you using the same techniques or different strategies from like your little one is 2.5. So there's quite
Mhm.
a that's 9 years difference between the two. So you're
Exactly eight
different.
and a half, literally exactly
Okay.
exactly eight and a half. Yeah.
So you're different. And you also your first are boys, she's a girl. Do you find that you are parenting any different? Like, are you a more
Two.
confident, competent parent? Are you following the basic standards that you had 11 years ago? Or what are you finding is the
The
difference?
basic things I are the same because the values, the core values didn't change. The core
Mhm.
values for us were always to raise the children that deeply love and accept who they are, that they feel loved and accepted within that house, within us, but also they feel confident enough to be themselves in the world and not to care what other people might think or project or you know, about them. It's the most important thing. And we always talk about it. The most important thing is what you think about it. When they were small, for example, and they loved pink, and they went to the crash, and people and the kids were saying, "Oh, but pink is for girls," or like purple is for girls. And I was saying, "But why?" I was like, "Do you like this color?" I was like, "It's just a concept that they learn somewhere. But if
Mhm.
you like it and you own it, do you feel good with it? Yes. So why would you listen to someone else?" Those core values are always the same, to make sure that they motivate themselves from inside, that they're self-motivated, that are kind people, but the people who can boldly stand for themselves and speak for themselves at the same time. So we never looked for obedience, which sometimes is very hard because sometimes you are conditioned to actually just, can you just do what I'm
Mhm.
telling you, and it can be frustrated. But then you're going back to that thing. It's like, man, this is not what I want. Or looking at them and thinking like, wow, they're so incredible because they can voice things. And that's what, for example, brought some tension sometimes with the grandparents, because they would voicing themselves in the way that, you know, grandparents might not be used to. I was always a kid who was standing for themselves, for herself, and speaking out loud. I was going to loads of troubles, and no one was standing
Up
behind
for
me to
you.
kind of
Yeah.
support that, right? But I'm doing that now, and I'm saying, no, that's not okay. He has a right to say that, and you know, and you have to apologize as well if you do something wrong, which is like was never kind of a thing with my parents to ever apologize, but they
Mhm.
did apologize a few times to my kids, which I think is a huge win.
Well,
You
it kind
know.
of shows you that it doesn't have to, history doesn't need to repeat itself. And
No, and they
sometimes it,
understand so much now. They grew as well with us. Like when we were growing as a parent, their way of looking at things, and it's like they're such an incredible grandparents. They always, because there's a massive between my and my brother is also 8.5 years. So he's got adult kids now. He's got two daughters. They're 20. 4 and 21. So when the boys were born, they were like around 10, you know, and they were so mindful of making sure that they still feel loved. And it's such a beautiful journey for you as well, to look how your parents are approaching your children and the whole love and attention they give them, and how they grow as well and change throughout the years. I think it's beautiful, beautiful thing. And going back to the thing that parenting different boys and Sophia, yes, I do parent different as well, in a way, because I've done so much work on myself that I am completely different person. I've done so much emotional work on myself, nervous system regulation work on myself, that I know how to approach things differently. I've got friends with little kids as well, and sometimes they're first-time parents. It's like, oh my God, how come you are so calm? Because of all this work. Am I always calm? No, but I know when I'm hitting my threshold and I have to do things about it. And I kind of to attend myself every day. I make sure that my nervous system is, regulated and taken care of. And also, because of all this emotional work I've done, my capacity to hold my own emotions and their emotions grew.
So I want to ask you, because a lot of parenting itself can be overwhelming, but when you are parenting and you're also running your own business, it's two really big jobs. So how are you managing that? Like what, you know, strategies or what things make it positive and, that you're happy with what you're doing? Like, what do you do that someone else might not be doing right now that maybe if they tried that, one or two things that would really help their world?
It's a work in progress, because, balance never looks the same. Literally on the day-to-day basis, it might be completely different thing. I noticed that, first of all, making sure that I give time and attention to my kids will actually create more time for myself, because their cup is full. So then I have more space to do my own things. But mostly it's working on yourself. That's what makes such a difference, because you know how to manage.
But most parents would say, like you said, your husband doesn't remember so much from the first 2 years. A lot of parents say
Zero,
that.
say more.
But a lot of parents are like that. They're just trying to, get everything done well, take care of the children the best they can, do their business the best they can. And there's not a lot of mind space for a lot of other things,
Yeah,
even
because
though it would benefit. I know it would benefit, but I don't know that there are a lot of people that feel like they have that flexibility with their time that they will
and I
pursue these.
understand that. I understand that because we're going into those constructs again, from societal constructs of the things that they have to be done and how they have to be done. And you you go into doing, like doing, and there's no space for being at all. And when you are in that cycle, you cannot see outside of it. I still talk to lots of parents like that. And, I just don't have a time. And it's so funny because I just recorded a little thing on my stories, literally talking about it yesterday. It's about, I don't have a time, I don't have a time. And we start using that as an excuse of like, I just don't have a time. I can't, I would love to, but I don't have a time. Right. And it's like, oh yeah, I would love to do the business, but I don't have a time. And unfortunately, everything comes down to prioritizing. What is the most important things for you? And it comes down as well to the fact that if you do not take care of yourself, you won't make space for yourself, there will be no way to be the mother or the father you dream of being to your kids. There's no way. You're always going to come short to your expectations, because you will be just pushing and pushing and going and going and going. And it's a culture around us that really is glorifying that approach. of doing. But it's only when you start slowing down, and this is what we've learned as parents as well. My husband hit depression in early years of boy's life, and that was a very difficult period for us, um, for many, many reasons. But also, this is the situations that you can either make or break. Again, is your choice. So we choose to do something about it. We choose to move with it, to go with it, and we found more ways to tap into ourselves. We've done so much work because of that as well, and we noticed that the more we expand here and give to ourselves, everything around changes.
Yeah.
And then, you think like, oh, how I can do anything like with two boys. Well, I start getting up earlier. They had I was very lucky with the way they were sleeping. I knew they were pretty much sleeping from 7:30 to 7:30. So that was blessing. Sophia is completely all over the place. So this is not happening. But it was two of them, and we were making sure that, for example, I would get up like, I don't know, 5:30 to do my meditation, to do my journaling, to do my yoga. So I am grounded and happy for the day. So because I gave to myself, I centered myself, and we would take turns who's doing what now. And boys learn as well. It's like, okay, mommy's meditating now. We're not gonna be interrupting her, and they literally learn that. And I was doing yoga with them as well because I was teaching yoga and kids yoga at that time, and they were doing that with me. Um, so they were, but also it's the modeling for children, the modeling of self-care and self-love, that you have to take care of yourself. There has to be a space for you in your life. You cannot just be doing everything for everybody else. There has to be space for you.
So it sounds like you've done a lot of work to get to that point, which is really admirable, and I'm sure it is very positive as far as your family goes. But what would you say currently is still a challenge that you're working on, a parenting challenge?
Making sure that everybody's gets enough attention.
Okay.
Because with a toddler who's, it's a toddler and it's a lot of attention and it's everywhere. Um, Sometimes it's hard to make sure that, especially throughout the day, to be able to really focus on each child individually. And also because my boys are twins, they have this very specific relationship, and when they're in their world, that's it. Sometimes when we go on the hikes as well, they would just go into their world. They would just start talking about something, and they're creating so many things. Like they write their own books and their own computer games, and they have the whole worlds they created, and they go into that, and that's it. And even if you try to engage, like, they're gonna say 2, 3 sentences, and then just go into that as well. So to finding the ways of making sure that everybody is getting attention. So for us, this is kind of absolute mandatory thing, is the evenings, that in the evenings we each go to one of the boys' room, because they are separate now since last year. They really needed that. It was too much of being together. And that was something as well we noticed with twins, because they've been always together, and they needed a break. They really did. They needed their own space. And now it's so much easier as well, because when I go to their room, I'm in their space, and I can give the attention to them as well, because their room is their space. So that helped a lot. And the fact that, yeah, we do that every evening. And we do breath work together or meditation together every evening. So, and then we talk every evening. So, or we just lie down and snuggle. It's about just
Connection.
being, connection.
Yeah.
Nothing special. It's just being there.
So what would you say, like, what would be your definition of success as a parent?
Wow. Um, My definition of success to be a parent, being a parent, would be probably seeing my children happy, but in a much broader way than just happy. Seeing my children being able to navigate through life with this deep self-trust and confidence into their own abilities, that they know that they're all right, that no matter what the life throws at them, they know they will be fine, that they will pass, that they have skills, they have tools to help them through difficult times, and they always know there's a there's a space and place within us for them, and they always can come back home. But they don't have to look for that, because they know they're good because of what we planted in them in their
Beautiful.
childhood.
Beautiful. Well, as we're getting close to wrapping up, there's two more things. And the first one is to ask you if there was going to be a movie made of your parenting life up till this point, what would that movie be called? And what would be a short synopsis of the movie?
That would be it would be growth through difficulties, or like my goodness, it's all those really hard times that I had, and I had plenty, really had plenty. They redefined me and who I am as a person so much. It's just, yeah, the parenting was the biggest catalyst for growth and evolution for me. Massive. And the synopsis would be just, this comparison of, when you sometimes on Instagram, you have the Instagram and the reality. So you think how things look like and how they really are, because we don't talk about it enough.
Yeah.
It's everyone's like, oh yes, let's have kids, it's gonna be wonderful, it's like Disney movie. No, it's not. It's not. There are the moments like that, but to get to those moments, there's so much messiness like under the surface that you have to navigate, that you have to go through, that you have to learn from. So it's just to see how those things really go.
Very nice. Okay, the final question is, picture yourself sharing some wisdom with your child as they are entering the world of parenting themselves. So when you were first becoming a grandmother, what would you say to them about parenting?
That you're entering the most beautiful journey of your life, but also the most difficult one. And that you have to remember that makes me emotional. You have to remember to be gentle towards yourself, to be loving and accepting towards yourself, to give yourself a grace, because you will make mistakes, because children don't come with a manual. You have to figure it out yourself, and you have to figure it out in the best way. And when you make mistakes, you learn from it, and you also use that to show kids that we are all humans.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, okay, I want to say, thank you very much for sharing so much of your parenting life, your parenting journey, and it is unique in many ways with the twins, with being raising your children in countries other than the ones that you're coming from, and so you have a lot of different components, and it's very inspiring, I guess, to hear the focus that you have on communication and connection, because that's usually what drives us to be the best parent that we can be. So thank you very much for joining me today and sharing your insights.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
But you know, as well with the communication and what we're saying to kids as well, it's like we can say whatever and how much we want, but until we embody things and until we being a model of what we say, it's also not gonna land. So we have to really stand behind what we say and
Well, what
be
we
an
do has far more power than what we say, always
absolutely.
and forever. So maybe
Exactly.
the trick is not the trick, but the secret, the magic is when both of those mesh and align and come out in a natural way through real, authentic communication. And then you will have the deep
Exactly.
connection. Mm.
Because then you can refer to, it's like, do you see how I've dealt with
Yeah.
that very stressful situation? This is what we talk about, and this is the tools I'm giving to you because you see it working. You see it's working. So I think that's the point, the modeling, and then talking around that as well and using that as an example.
Yeah.
So it's
I
anchored
agree.
in real thing.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
If you're a parent raising a boy in today's complex world, be sure to explore sonhoodcoaching.com. You'll discover expert guidance and support designed to help you unlock your full parenting potential. As Amelia Gambedi says, this job is too difficult and too beautiful to do alone. Together we can explore this adventure and discover the magic of raising boys.